Hello, good afternoon. Hope you guys are doing well. So today's plan is to go through the skeleton part for the study guide. That part is what you have recordings on. And we will also have to go through the muscle part of the lecture. Okay, so no recordings for that. That's why I have to teach it to you. And of course, don't forget you have your quiz today for the urinary system. And you can do that before the end of today. So let's get started. First question, short answer. List 4 functions of the skeletal system. So the skeletal system includes things like support the body. Okay, it creates a framework to prop us up so we don't fall over as a result of gravity. The bones are also important for protection. So protect internal organs. We already learned in previous units that the cranium, which is like the skull, right? The cranium protects the brain. Okay. The rib cage protects the lungs. The pelvic bone protects reproductive organs. So different bones protects various internal organs. Another function of bones that we actually talked about in lecture 2 is the ability to create new blood cells. So that's called hematopoiesis. Okay, production of new blood cells. All right. In the bone marrow, of course. And one last one. It is for mineral storage. So not just calcium, which is what most people are familiar with. It also stores things like phosphate. Okay, so various forms, various salt that contains calcium as well as phosphate in it. So yeah, those are the 4 major functions that we talked about in the lecture. List 4 types of movable joints and give an example. Excuse me, and give an example of each. So in terms of joints, there are different types. There are, for example, immovable joints. So those do not allow movement. There are partially movable joints, such as the between the vertebrae, and then there are the movable joints. Anybody remember any of the movable joints? Just want to throw it out there and see if any of you remember movable joints. Yes, Tina, the atlas and the axis, that would be an example of what kind of joint though? You have given me an example, but what category would that be? Is it a hinge joint? Is it a pivot joint? Like what is it? That's okay. That is a pivot joint. Yeah, thank you, Mavis. So pivot joint would be C1 and C2, which is, of course, the atlas and axis. Okay, so that's the one in the neck, right? That allows you to pivot your head, turn your head side to side. Okay, so another one that I just mentioned is the hinge joint. Anybody know example of hinge joint in the body?
Elbow.
Elbow, yeah, very, very good. And the other one? And knee, that's right. Ryan said ball and socket, that's correct. Ball and socket. Right, so that would be like the shoulder, okay? the head of the humerus would connect into the glenoid process, right? We learned about that on the slide about the shoulder. There's a little groove in the scapula that allows the humerus to go into. And of course, the other one is the hip. Right? So the head of the femur goes into the acetabulum. If you need a refresher on what those are, we will talk about it later. And one last one, saddle. Right? Saddle joint, and that would be like the carpals and metacarpals. I mean, there are other joints as well, right? Like condylar joints, but we only have to know these 4 ones. Okay, these are the 4 that I want you to remember. Okay, next question. Color all the axial bones in blue and all the appendicular in red. Okay. So axial includes the skull, the vertebral column, right, the sacrum, and then the tailbone, the coxal bone. Right, so everything here is the axial bone. Appendicular, oh, sorry, and the rib cage as well, of course. The rib cage. Okay. Everything else that attaches onto this main core frame, that is the appendicular. Okay, so appendicular includes the clavicle, the scapula at the back, humerus, ulna and radius, bones of the hand, your pelvic bones, femur, tibia and fibula, as well as all the bones in the foot. Okay, so the pink one here, appendicular. Blue stuff, axial. Okay. Next, complete the following chart by providing examples for each type of bone. So we can classify bones based on their shape. Flat bone. Anybody have examples of flat bones?
Bone of skull, Professor.
Yeah, exactly right. Thank you. So a lot of bones in the skull are considered flat bones. Not all of them though. So parietal bone. Parietal bone. That's like these ones, protecting the parietal lobe, of course. If it says scapula, yeah, that's pretty flat. Okay, scapula, which is at the back right here. Okay. You know, I'm just gonna do one more, like frontal bone. All right. Long bone. Long bone is relatively rectangular. Okay, so you guys should have a lot of examples for me, right? For long bones. Hopefully. Yep, femur, that's correct. Ryan and Tina said humerus. Yeah, Mavis as well. But you know, things like metacarpals, right? That's also long bone, right? These ones, the ones in the hand, right? Like these ones, those are also long bone. Long doesn't necessarily have to be like, you know, this long. Long, by definition, just rectangular in shape. Okay. Short bone would be more like, you know, square in shape, cubes in shape. So that would be things like carpals. Right? Carpals are the bones of the wrist, right? How many carpals do we have? Anybody remember? How many carpals?
8.
Sorry?
8, Professor.
Yeah, 8. That's right. Eight on each hand, right? So total of 16. the tarsals would be 7, so total of 14. I think that's what you were thinking about, Gurwinder. Tarsal. Okay. Irregular bones are like things that are complex in shape. So that include things like vertebrae. Okay. The sacrum. That's pretty weird looking. Sphenoid. Okay, so all these bones are irregular bone. Okay, bones of the eye socket. Let me see if I can pull this thing up. Full screen. Hold on, I'm trying to zoom in, zoom out, right click. Setting full screen. Okay, there it is. Okay, let me see if I can share the other screen with you. Screen number 1. Can you see that skeleton here? Yeah. Okay. You know, actually, I think I should move it to this side over here. It's much easier that way. Okay, full screen. Okay, so that's the skull, right? And we want to see all the bones that forms around the eye socket. All right, so you should write this down as I talk about it. So there is one frontal bone right over here, and if I tilt it up a little bit, you can see the frontal bone actually forms the top of your eye socket. Okay, another name for eye socket is orbit, O-R-B-I-T, orbit. Okay, so one frontal bone. On the side here, we have the, oops, oh boy. We have the zygomatic bone, okay, right here. That's the cheekbone. Okay, the prominence of your cheek is formed by the zygomatic bone. And you can see the zygomatic bone forms the lateral side of your eye socket. Right, so zygomatic on the left side and zygomatic on the right side. Okay. Down here, we have one big one. That's the maxilla. It's not the first time we talk about a maxilla. When we learned the digestive system, I told you the front of the hard palate, you stick your thumb into your mouth and you press up, you are feeling the maxilla. So the maxilla actually forms the socket for your upper row of teeth as well. But the maxilla, you can see over here, it forms the bottom of your eye socket as well as the part of the medial side of your eye socket as well. Okay. Now the other bones are a little bit hard to see. There is one behind the maxilla right here that is called the lacrimal bone. So you have one on each side. The left, oh boy, left lacrimal. It's a little bit of a tongue twister there. And then we have the right lacrimal bone. Okay, so inside the lacrimal bone, that's where your tear duct is going to be running through. Okay. And then behind the lacrimal bone is your ethmoid bone. There's only one ethmoid bone. You can see it goes to both sides. Okay, so on the medial side of your eye socket, there are 3 bones, starting with the maxilla at the very anterior end, followed by lacrimal bones, and finally we have the ethmoid bone. Okay. There's one at the back, the sphenoid bone. Sphenoid bone goes from one side all the way to the other. If you're staring at the empty eye socket of a skull, you'll be looking right at the sphenoid bone. Okay. Now you can see there is a hole at the back in the sphenoid bone. Anybody know what goes through there? What's gonna pass through the sphenoid, the hole here at the back, in the sphenoid bone? Any guess? The optic nerve is correct, Tina. Very good. Okay, so the eyeballs go here, and then the optic nerve has to go inside the brain, right? So it has exit at the back through these holes. I'm going to isolate this guy. And you can see that's what the sphenoid bone looks like, okay? It's kind of like a butterfly, and it's a irregular shape. Now, at the top here, there is a groove. You see, there's a little saddle, almost a groove. Anybody want to tell me what organ, what structure, what brain structure goes there? Right in this little groove.
Pituitary gland.
That's right. That's where the pituitary gland is going to sit, right? Remember, the hypothalamus is up here, and then coming down is the pituitary gland. And it has a nice groove that protects it. Okay, so that's that. I think I got all of them in terms of the eye socket. All right, let's go back to the notes there. So name the 7 bones that forms the eye socket. We have the frontal bone. Okay, just one of them. We have the maxilla. Also just one. Maxilla is this one, right? It goes all the way up to the middle and the bottom of the eye socket. Zygomatic. That's the cheekbone. How many zygomatic bones do we have? If you're thinking about 2, that would be correct. Sphenoid bone. That's the one at the back. Oh, I know what bone I missed. Okay, sorry. I just remember. There is another one that is kind of tucked away. It's really hard to see over here, but let me try to find it. Okay, right there. Okay, that's the palatine bone. That forms a little bit of the eye socket at the back, but the palatine bone is actually much bigger than that, okay? If I isolate it here, by the way, this thing is on eCentennial, right? So like you can play around with it if you want. It's an excellent way of learning all the bones. This is the palatine bone, okay? The palatine forms the posterior 1/3 of your hard palate. Okay, so the front of the hard palate is the maxilla, and the back of it is the palatine bone. All right, and that little horn right there, that fits into a tiny spot in your orbit. Okay, so one palatine bone. Let me see if I can show you in another view. Maybe it's a little bit hard to use over here. So let me delete the jaw. Oh, that looks kind of freaky. And over here, if I zoom in, it's not really. Maybe there. Okay, so you see that's the hard palate, right? That's the maxilla, and then behind it, that's the palatine. So hard palate, anterior 2/3, posterior 1/3. Can you guys visualize that? I'm sorry, it's like I probably should have do a better job here, but that's the best I could do with the model right now. Any question? Oh boy, it's going all over the place. There we go. Okay, so I hope that kind of makes sense. Let's go back to here. So we have the one sphenoid bone. Behind the maxilla, for the middle part of your eye socket, we have the lacrimal bone, right? Lacrimal, and we have 2 of them. Tear duct is inside that. We have the ethmoid bone, just 1, and the palatine, also just 1. All right. Various sections of the vertebral column. So if I go back to the no, that's the wrong screen. If I go back to the model here, right? This is the vertebral column, right? At the back. Let me just delete some of these things that we don't need. Oh boy. This one used to be easier to use, but then they change it now. So I'm still not really fully used to it. But there you go. Okay, so that's the backbone. The top section here, it's called the cervical section. That's basically the neck. Okay, and there are 7 cervical bones. Over here we have the thoracic, which we have 12 of them, and each of the thoracic vertebrae would have a pair of ribs coming out on both sides. So that would be the first rib. And I deleted all the other ones, right? But you can still see on the other side, right? So second rib, third rib. How many ribs do we have in total? Do you guys remember? How many pairs of ribs do we have?
12.
12. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so 7 of them are true ribs, and then the 5 of them are false ribs, and we can review that in a second. And then after the 12th thoracic, we would have the lumbar. Okay, followed by the sacrum, which is down here. Sacrum, that's one of the irregular ones that we talked about. And then we have the coccyx bones, the tailbone. Okay, if we had a tail, this would continue and form a lot more of the vertebrate. Okay, so there you have it. Now, if I zoom in here on the side, I mean, you cannot really see it in this particular model because I took away the nervous system, but there is a hole here, right? So that hole is where the spinal nerve is going to come out, right? And between each of the vertebrae, we would have a little disc in between, an intervertebral disc that protects them, right? So it's not going to have friction when you're bending forward and backwards. But sometimes the disc can get thinner as we age, and then these 2 bones can crush on each other and pinch on the nerve that's coming out of it, right? Then people might have numbness in their limbs, tingly feelings in their limbs because of the compressed nerve. It's called pinched nerve, right? You might have heard of that. Okay, so that's that. Let's see. How do we go back here? All right, so list the various sections of the vertebral column. We have the cervical, times 7. And C1 and C2 is atlas and axis, followed by thoracic, times 12. And we have the lumbar, times 5. Right, L1 to L5. Between L4 and L5, that's where you do the spinal tap, right? We talked about that before. And then we have the sacrum. And 3 to 5 coccyx bone. All right. That's that. Moving on. Here we have a chart, right? Calcitonin and PTH. I know I did it already in the recordings, but let's go through it again just for safe measures. These are antagonistic hormones, okay? Just like the ANH and aldosterone that we learned last time, okay? So calcitonin is secreted from your thyroid gland. Okay, your thyroid gland is right here. Okay, thyroid gland. Don't confuse the thyroid with the thymus. The thymus is the one that's in front of the heart. That's the one where the T cells come from, right? The thyroid secretes 3 hormones, okay? And one of them is calcitonin. So what triggers the release of calcitonin? Okay, IN, if there's an increase in calcium, increase in blood calcium level. Okay. Then that would trigger the release of calcitonin from the thyroid gland, and the effects would be to find a place for all these extra calcium, right? So a very good place to put extra calcium would be to deposit them into the bones. So increase calcium deposition in bones. You're going to put more in the bones. And whatever is still left in the blood, if it's still too much, then you will increase calcium secretion in the kidneys. Okay, and you can reduce calcium absorption in the kidneys. Right? We don't want to take them back. We want to get rid of them in the urine, of course. So that will bring the calcium level back down. Okay. As we'll learn today, calcium, well, we actually learned that calcium is needed to release a neurotransmitter. And today we'll learn that calcium is needed for muscle contraction. And so if you have too much calcium in the blood, that actually would cause your muscle to twitch a little bit because of uncontrolled signal coming out from your nerves. So we don't want that. That's why we have to bring it back down with calcitonin. The parathyroid gland, the parathyroid hormone, or PTH, is secreted from the parathyroid gland. Okay, and you have 4 of them. Okay, so like, pretend the mouse is my thyroid gland. Okay, I'm going to take it out like that. I'll be looking at the back of my thyroid gland. They would be right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 4 parathyroid glands. Okay, so the thyroid gland looks like this. Okay, and if I'm looking at it from the back, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's your parathyroid glands. And the trigger for PTH would be not enough calcium, decrease in blood calcium. Okay, so we want to bring the calcium level back up, right? So contrary to too much calcium, if you don't have enough in the blood, you might experience muscle weakness, right? To name one example. So you will absorb calcium from bones, right? Kidney. When I say kidney, I mean the filtrate, right? And also the small intestine. Okay, so you want to try to recoup some of the calcium from those locations and put them back in the blood. Okay, that's pretty much it. Okay, we have to name 3 types of muscles, but we haven't learned it yet, so we'll do that in a bit. Okay, let's go through some of these fill in the blanks and see. Oh, by the way, right? Like, let's actually go back to last week's diagram for a second. Remember we drew this thing towards the end, I think. Okay, so now we can actually change this diagram, right? To fit what we want. So instead of saying normal blood pressure, we can say normal blood calcium. Okay. So if you increase calcium, what hormone is going to be released again? We just talked about it. Do you remember what it was? If you have increased blood calcium, what hormone do we need to bring it back down? Calcitonin is correct. Calcitonin, right? From thyroid, right? That will decrease the calcium level from the blood, put the extra ones in the bones, and then pee out the ones that you don't need. On the other hand, if you have a drop in calcium level, then we need PTH from parathyroid, which will then increase the calcium in the blood by taking it from the bones, increasing absorption from filtrate, as well as the small intestine if you are having any dietary intake. Okay, so you see, it's the same chart, but now we apply it to different situations, right? And calcitonin and PTH would be considered as a pair of antagonistic hormone. Okay, they work in opposite to each other to try to maintain a balance. And the balance, in this case, the homeostasis, would be the calcium level. We will learn one more set later on. Right? It's insulin and glucagon. We will learn that next time. All right, fill in the blanks. Let's see what we have here. Bone cells. Okay, what do we call bone cells? Bone cells are called osteocytes. Okay, they live inside your bones, and they secrete the bone matrix, right? During development, cartilage and connective tissues are replaced by bone in a process called ossification. The surface of the bone is covered by a layer of vascular connective tissue called the periosteum. It allows things like tendons to connect to, blood vessels, nerve endings. So if you think about the bone, long bone like this, the shaft of the bone, right? The shaft of the bone is called the diaphysis. Okay, diaphysis number 4. Whereas the ends of the bone, the long bone, it is called the epiphysis. All right. The structural unit of compact bone is called an osteon. Okay, you might remember they look like 3 rings, and I drew it out in one of the videos. There are specialized bone cells that will be responsible for breaking down bones to release the calcium in the blood. These would be the osteoclasts. Right? So you would expect the osteoclasts to be more active in the presence of which one? Calcitonin or PTH? Do you expect osteoclasts to be more active in the presence of calcitonin or PTH? What do you think? PTH is correct because when you don't have enough calcium, PTH will help you take the calcium from the bone, right? And so PTH will stimulate the osteoclasts to break down the bone and get them back into the blood. Osteoclasts. The other one that builds the calcium, that deposits the calcium into the bones, that would be the osteoblasts. Okay, osteoblast. Calcified matrix of compact bone, that is called a lamina. Pockets found throughout the osteons where the osteocytes are found, those are called the lacuna. Okay, so here, right? These are lacuna. Small channels of radii from a lacuna, right? Little cracks like these, right? They allows blood vessels to transverse through the osteon and allows the bone cells to move from one place to another. Those are called the caniculus. Okay, sorry, plural, so it's caniculi. This one is also plural, so we add an E. Okay, which bone houses the ear? Which bone has the ear canal? Okay, if you go look over here, right, there's the ear, right? And actually it is the temporal bone, right? If I delete the ear, like over here, ear is cartilage, right? So if I delete the ear, you can see the ear canal is right there. and it's part of the temporal bone. All right. In fact, you know, if you take your hand and you feel the back of your ear, you are actually rubbing. Oh my goodness, I don't know why that's not. You are actually rubbing the this knob right here. Right? This knob right here. That's the knob behind your ear. And that's part of your temporal bone. Okay. So, answer is temporal. The hard palate, I told you several times today already. Maxilla at the front, and palatine at the back. Large hole found at the base of the occipital bone. That is the foramen. Foramen means hole. Magnum. Magnum means really big. So literally big hole. Okay. And it's right here, right? At the base of the occipital bone. So if I take the occipital bone at the back, let's see if I can isolate this guy right there at the bottom. That's the foramen magnum. Okay, and on the lateral side of the foramen magnum, you can see there are these round knobs, right? So those will sit right in the grooves of your C1, and it allows you to nod the head. Okay, atlas axis allow you to shake the head. These round knobs will form a joint with your C1 to allow you to nod the head. The back of the eye socket, that would be the sphenoid. Sphenoid bone. Okay. Number 16 forms the lower jaw. That's the mandible. Okay, it's the only movable bone in the whole head, and it forms a joint with the temporal bone, right? So like this joint right here. Sometimes if you put your hand there, you can feel it. You can feel it click, right? That's the MTJ, right? The mandibular temporal joint. Which bone forms the prominence of the cheek? Zygomatic, which also forms the side of your eye socket. C1, C2 is atlas and axis. If you have trouble, remember which one is 1 and which one is 2. Look at them alphabetically. Okay, put them in alphabetical order. L comes before X, C1 and C2. I talked about how spinal nerve exits through an opening between two vertebrae. That hole, that opening is called the intervertebral foramen. Okay. 3 parts of the sternum. So there is my sternum right here. Okay. We have the manubrium at the top. That's where the first pair of rib connects to, and then part of the second rib as well. The main part of the sternum is called the body of the sternum. And that's where, 2 to 7 is connected to. Okay, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They're all connected to the body. And then we have the xiphoid process. That's where the diaphragm is going to hook onto. Okay. So this whole thing is the sternum, the breastbone, I think it's called. So manubrium, body, and xiphoid. Xiphoid process. Okay. Bones of the forearm, we have the radius. That's the one on the outside. If you stand in anatomical position, palms facing forward, the one that's outside, that's the radius. The one that's on the inside, that's the ulna. That's like the chicken wings, right? Analogous part to the chicken wings in terms of anatomy. The knee and elbow are examples of hinge joint. We mentioned that earlier already. The something are bones that forms the fingers and toes. Do you guys know that one? Yeah, what do we call the finger bones and the toes bone?
Phalanges.
Phalanges, that's right. Phalanges. And how many phalanges do we have per hand? Good question. How many phalanges in the hand? 14 is correct, Mavis. Okay, so 3 on each of these 4 fingers. You can feel them. If you bend your finger like that, right? That's like 1 phalange, G2, and then 3. So 1, 2, 3. So 3 times 4 is 12. But then the thumb only has 2. 1 and 2. Right? So together, we have 14 phalanges. Similar situation at the toes. I'm not going to show you my foot, don't worry. But you can count your own, and you would also have 14. The coxal bone is formed by 3 bones. We have the ilium with an I this time. Don't confuse it with the one in the small intestine, right? We have the pubis, and we have the ischium. All right, I'm going to show you what they look like on the diagram here. All right, so this is the ilium. Okay, imagine like, carrying your grocery in a box, and then you got to open the door so you can rest your grocery on your hip, right? The box would be resting on your iliac crest. Okay, so that's the ilium. And I'm going to delete the leg here, okay? And you can see the ilium forms part of the socket, the ball and socket joint of your hip, right? So this socket is called the acetabulum. Right, so we have the ilium here. At the front, we have the pubis. And we have the ischium. If you're sitting right now, which I imagine all of you are sitting on your ischium. Okay, so pubis, ischium, and ilium, and they all form the acetabulum, where the head of the femur goes in. Okay, you cannot really see it here. It's somehow not showing. But between the pubis bones, there is going to be a little bit of a cartilage here that connects them. That's called a pubis symphysis. We probably have one coming up later to label it. Okay. So this hole here, allows blood vessels and nerves to go into our legs. And it's good that they're going through the hole here, because when we sit down, we don't want to be accidentally compressing a blood vessel or a nerve, right? So by having them feed through this hole, which is called the obturator foramen, it's actually a good thing. So all these things we labeled already in the video. This is the this hole here is the constraint that determines how early the baby have to come out. If the baby grows too big and stays too long, beyond 40 weeks or so, then they might be physically too big to fit through this this opening, and then we might have to do a C-section. So over here, the head of the femur joins the coxal bone, which is what we just talked about, at the acetabulum. Acetabulum. Okay, so that's, again, it's a ball and socket joint. The coxal bone, the 2 halves, right, actually joins anteriorly at the front at the pubis symphysis. Okay, and you will see this again in when we learn the reproductive system next class. In a mid-sagittal section, you will see the pubis symphysis. Okay, maybe I can show you quickly, just so that you can have an idea of where that might be. So this is the man, obviously, and over here, that's the pubis symphysis. If you're looking at the mid-sagittal section, right, that's where the two pubis bone will be joining at the front. And for the female, right, for the female, it's right here. That's the symphysis pubis. Sometimes it's backwards. Okay, so that's what it is. Okay, next, what do we have next? Oops, where were we? All right, the something is known as the kneecap. That would be the patella. The patella is special because it's a bone that's embedded within a ligament. A ligament connects a bone and a bone, right? So like this would be your femur, okay, and then you would have your tibia here. Okay, the fibula is on the side, and you would have a tendon that connects the femur and the you would have a ligament rather, a ligament that connects the femur and the tibia, and then the patella would be found within that ligament. Okay. Heel bone is called the calcaneus. Okay, calcaneus. It's one of your tarsal. You have 7 of them. Okay, parathyroid hormone is secreted from the parathyroid gland. It's probably one of the easiest one to remember. Something lowers blood calcium level, and this hormone is secreted from something gland. So to lower blood calcium level, we need calcitonin. Okay, and increasing calcium leads to the release of calcitonin, and the effect is to lower it. Right? So the cause and the effect are opposite, right? You have to remember which one is which. And the calcium, so the calcitonin is released from the thyroid gland. Ricket is a condition caused by lack of vitamin D1. So without vitamin D1, you cannot absorb calcium too well, and that could lead to weakening of the bones. And if this occurs at early childhood development, then the bones will be so weak that it cannot support the weight of the child, and then their legs become ball-shaped. That's why the Canadian Pediatric Society recommends taking vitamin D supplements, especially if your baby is born in the winter, where there is not a lot of sunlight. And we cannot do any of these because we haven't learned it yet, but we will soon. Okay, any questions about the bones before we move on to the muscle? I mean, all of these diagrams we have labeled already, right? In the videos, so you just have to go watch them and learn about it. But I think I've covered most of the stuff already. So any questions before we move on? Okay. So this is the muscle PowerPoint. I just emailed you before class and sent you the link. It was always there, but in case you couldn't find it, I emailed it out to you. So if you have it, you can follow along. If not, I mean, you can always print it afterwards as well. So let me just run this PowerPoint. Oh, it's on my other screen. Hold on. Slideshow. Okay, there we go. So the muscular system. First of all, function of the skeletal muscle, right? So we have 3 types of muscle, right? We have the skeletal muscles, which are muscle that we can voluntarily control, okay? Voluntary control. Right? And we know anything that we can voluntarily control comes from the frontal lobe, right? From the primary motor cortex. The other 2 type of muscles that we do not have voluntary control over would be cardiac muscle let me turn on the caption so you can hear what I'm saying. There we go. Would be cardiac muscle, which is only found in the heart, as well as smooth muscle, right, which would be found in, say, your intestinal lining to create the peristalsis, right? So those are involuntary type of muscle. So cardiac, smooth muscle, and skeletal muscle. So we're going to focus on the skeletal muscle right now. The function of the skeletal muscle would be to support the body, okay? When you're sitting there, your back muscle, upper back and lower back muscles are actually constantly contracting to counteract gravity, right? So we don't slouch over, right? The bone does a little bit of the supporting, but the contraction of the muscle is also necessary to prop yourself up, right? If you have a child, you might remember when they're a baby, one of the earliest things you have to train them to do is tummy time, right? So for those of you who don't have kids, tummy time is basically put the kid literally on their tummy, and then they try to lift their head in the process, and that strengthens their neck muscle to prop their head up, right, to support their own head. So that's what I mean by support the body. They make bones and other parts of the body move. The bones and the joints cannot move on their own. Okay, they allow for movement, but the actual movement comes from the contraction of the muscle. So if I need to, create motion in the elbow, in the hinge joint here, I need to contract my bicep to do this, and then I would need to contract my tricep to do that. Okay, so the muscle is the source of the movement, but the joints enable that movement to occur. Maintain constant body temperature. Every time we contract the muscle, we actually uses ATP, and that creates heat, which in turn warms us up. Right? When we are very cold, we shiver, right? So shivering is actually extra muscle contraction that creates heat to help maintain the constant body temperature. Assist fluid movement in cardiovascular and lymphatic vessels. We learned about this like way back in lecture 1, right? When you contract your leg muscle, it helps with the venous return, right? Because it squeezes the blood in the vein, and that creates a little bit of pressure to help return the blood, as well as the lymph to general circulation. Finally, skeletal muscle also protects bone and internal organs and stabilizes joint. All right, that last one here is pretty self-explanatory. Next, structure and organization. All right, so we're going to draw the organization of the muscle, and it's a little bit complicated, but I encourage you to draw along with me, and ask questions if things don't really make sense. Okay, so please take out a piece of paper and we will try to draw it out. And it's a really big diagram. Okay, so if this is your paper, you probably want to start drawing here, and then we're gonna keep on going, and then coming back like this. Okay, so just so you're planning for the space. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna start here. We're gonna draw all the way to the right, and then probably loop back later on as well. Okay, so let's do this. I haven't drawn this for a while, so hopefully I'm not gonna make a mistake. So that's one bone, okay, and then let's say this is another bone here. Okay, this is the bone, and we'll say there is a muscle here. Okay, so a tendon, a muscle, and then another tendon. Okay, so that's the muscle, and we are attaching the muscle to the bone through the tendon. All right. Bone to bone is ligament. Muscle to bone is tendon. So what we will do next is we're going to take a slice of the muscle like this. We're going to slice it. I think of the muscle as this meat, and I'm going to slice it right down the center. And then we're going to look at the structure inside. So here is the bone again. Okay, there is the tendon that connects the muscle to the bone. And then This is my muscle. Okay, and I just cut it open virtually. And so we're going to be able to see the inside. Is that okay? All right. So first of all, the entire muscle is actually covered by a thin layer of connective tissue. Okay, I'm not going to go all the way to the end. I'll tell you why later. Okay, so there is going to be your thin layer of connective tissue that covers the entire muscle. Okay, so that would be called the epimysium. Okay, and it is connective tissue covering the entire muscle. Okay, this blue membrane here covers the entire muscle. Okay. Just let me know if I'm going too fast. All right. So when I don't know if you guys eat beef, okay? Let's some of you might not, but that's okay. If you do eat beef, when you cut the beef, what's the general rule of cutting the beef so that it's not going to be too tough? Like, how do you cut it so that it's going to be, you know, tender and not like too chewy? Any chef here? Any people who cook? What do they say when you buy the beef? Here's a slice of beef, and then you will see some bands on it. So how should you cut the beef? Does anybody know? No? Okay, then this is not going to help then, I guess. You're supposed to cut against the grain, right? That's what they say, right? So that it's not going to be too tough. But if you haven't done that before, then maybe it's not going to help this analogy. If you look at the inside of the muscle, you will see individuals circle like that. Okay. If you think about like maybe making a pulled pork sandwich or like chicken, you can shred the chicken into little strips, right? Those little strips are basically what I'm drawing right now. Okay. So this thing here, one of these things is called a fascicle. Fascicle. Sorry, fascicle. Okay, like icicle, but then fascicle. And a fascicle is a bundle of muscle cell, okay, which is called muscle fiber. Muscle cell. Okay, so that's a fascicle, that's a fascicle, and I can pull one of these fascicles out. Okay, so there, that's a fascicle that I just pull out. So this whole thing is a bundle of muscle cells, a bundle of muscle fibers. Now, between the fascicles, I might have blood vessels. Okay, because you need blood supply to your muscle. So those are the arteries, and then you might have a veins that's next to it. Okay, and we will also have some nerve endings. Okay, nerve endings. So these orange things, those are the nerves. Okay, nerve. And then these here, that's the blood vessel. Okay. Sorry, I'll get out of the way in a second. Does anybody have any question before I go further? Just like anything needs clarification? No? All right. Now, surrounding the fascicle, each fascicle is another membrane. Okay, so there's going to be a membrane that surrounds the fascicle, another one here, right? And it basically surrounds all of these things. Okay. And so when you pull one out, you can see this whole thing is covered by the pink stuff that I've been coloring. Okay, and again, I'm not going to go all the way. I'm just going to go a little bit. Like that. Okay, so look, listen, right? Look at the blue stuff here again. Right? If I peel away the epimysium, roll it back, the perimysium, immediately beneath the perimysium would be this pink stuff that I'm trying to draw. Right? Can you visualize that? Because all of these fascicles are surrounded by this pink layer. So outside of that would be the epimysium. When you roll away the epimysium, you would immediately see this pink connective tissue, which of course has a name, and that is called the perimysium. It is the connective tissue surrounding a fascicle. Okay. So a bunch of fascicle forms the muscle. So what is a fascicle again? Well, earlier we wrote here, a fascicle is a bundle of muscle cell, a bundle of muscle fiber. So if I look at the cross section here of our fascicle, I will see the individual muscle cell. Okay. So it's like kind of one layer nested into the next one, kind of like those, Russian dolls, right? And we can pull one of these things out, just like before. Okay, I'm gonna pull one of these things out. There we go. Can someone tell me? I just want to make sure that you guys are with me. What did I just pull out here? What do we call that? This thing that I just pulled out from this whole thing. This whole thing is a fascicle, right? By the way, okay, and there are many fascicles here. What exactly did I just pull out? Someone tell me. Or are you guys really lost? Okay, thank you for trying. That's the good try. This whole thing is a muscle, okay? A muscle contains a bunch of fascicles. These are fascicles. And a fascicle is a bundle of muscle cells. So when I pull out the fascicle and then I pull out one of these things, this thing that I just pull out, that is actually a muscle fiber. Okay, a muscle cell. Okay. Maybe I can help you guys with an analogy. Maybe I don't know. Let's see if this is gonna help. So crayons. Okay, you think about crayons. Okay? So one crayon is like a muscle cell, muscle fiber. Right? So we can take a bunch of crayons, okay, and I put it in a box. You know how they sell these at Walmart? So we have a box of crayon. So the box of crayon would be analogous to a fascicle. Okay, I can open up the box. And I can take one crayon out, right? Can you imagine that? So each crayon is a muscle cell, a muscle fiber. When you have a whole pack of them, that would be the fascicle. Is that a little bit better so far? Give me some response here before I continue with the analogy. All right. Now keep on imagining this. Okay, when you buy these crayons, right? The box, sometimes they come with a shrink wrap, right? So you know, you can't just open it at the supermarket and take some out or something, right? So it comes with a shrink wrap. Okay, shrink wrap. And that's kind of like this paramecium I'm talking about. Okay, it's a layer of connective tissue like the shrink wrap that goes around the fascicle. Okay, I hope you're still following me. Now keep imagining this, okay? Think about buying this at like Costco or something, some kind of a store where you can buy it in bulk. So rather than having just one pack, you want to buy it for the, you know, whole class or something. So, you know, it's going to have many packs, 2 packs, 3 packs, you know, 6, 7, 8, whatever, many packs. Okay. And it all comes in a gigantic box. Don't draw this, okay? Like you can just try to understand what I'm saying. Okay. Can you visualize that? I know it's a very bad diagram. So, but like you have a big box, and then you open up the big box, and inside you have the individual crayon boxes. Okay. So the big box is like the whole muscle. And when you open the whole box, open the muscle, inside you will see the individual small boxes of crayon, which represent our fascicle. Now I can take one of those boxes out, one of those fascicles out, open the little box and take one of the marker out, and those marker will represent the muscle fiber. Any question here with the analogy and or like with anything at all before we proceed? Because we're gonna have to go deeper, and it's only gonna get more confusing. So you know, let's just clear the air if this is not really working out. If there is anything I can help to make this a little bit better. Anything? Okay. So, you know, this big box might also come with some kind of shrink wrap, right? And that would represent the epimysium. Okay. So now let's go back to our crayon analogy. If you take one of these crayons out, okay, take one of these crayons out. Okay? You know how crayons, they have a bit of paper on it, right? That wraps around the individual crayon. Well, the muscle fiber, which is our analogy is the crayon, the muscle fiber actually has another layer that goes around it. And that is the yet another layer of connective tissue. We go in here. That connective tissue is called the endo. Choose a darker color. Endomysium. Which is connective tissue surrounding a muscle fiber, which is just another name for muscle cell, okay? So when you peel back the paramecium, you would immediately be staring at the endomysium. Okay. Just like when you open the box here, you would immediately be staring at the paper wrapping of your crayon. Okay, so this is one cell here. So of course, since it is a cell, it would have all the structures of a cell. So what surrounds the outside of a cell? You probably remember we have a cell membrane, right? A cell membrane. Let me find another color here. So there we would have the cell membrane. Okay, right underneath the endomysium. Okay, so this here is the cell membrane. And I'm really sorry this is more complicated than it needs to be, but they have a special name for the cell membrane. Since we are talking about muscle, it is called the sarcolemma. Okay. And the inside of a cell, that would be the cytoplasm, right? Cytoplasm, which also has a special name now because we're talking about the muscle. It is called the sarcoplasm. So the prefix sarco is just for muscle. We are almost there with this diagram. I'm sure you have had enough already. If I look at the inside of the muscle fiber, you will yet see more of little things, okay, these little dots. And yes, we can pull one of them out as well. We can pull one of them out. And this is the last time we're going to pull it out, okay, I promise. Pull it out like that. Okay, so these things are found throughout the entire cytoplasm. Okay, and each one of them is called a myofibril. Okay, myofibril. So what is in the myofibrils? Well, the myofibrils is actually chopped up into many, many repeating units. It's kind of like, you know, having sushi, right? It's like a whole roll, and then you cut them into little rolls, and you can make many of them. So each roll is identical to the previous one. And these individual rolls is called a sarcomere. Sarcomere, which is the contractile unit of muscle. Okay. When a sarcomere shortens, then your muscle shortens, which creates a pull. Okay. So the sarcomere has two things in it, two key proteins in it. And you might remember learning about some of these things before. Okay. You have the thick one in the middle. Okay, so that's called the actin. Right here, these are actin. So the red one is actin filament, or just actin proteins. And in between the actins, you will have the myosin. Okay, so they kind of overlap a little bit like that. Yeah, so these are the myosin. Okay, so actin and myosin. And what happens is when the actin and myosin interact with each other, interaction with each other creates contraction. Okay. So as they contract, like think of these fingers represent actin, these fingers represent myosin. As they contract, right, the overlap increases, and then the sarcomere becomes shorter. And that's how you create contraction. Okay. Now, just one last thing before we leave this diagram alone. by now you should know the theme, right? Each of these things is covered by a layer of something. So these things are actually covered by a layer of ER, endoplasmic reticulum. But you should also know by now that because we're talking about muscle, that they go by a different name. So this thing here, the yellow thing that I'm drawing, that is called the sarcoplasmic reticulum, okay, which has contains lots of calcium. Okay, so we're going to talk about the role of calcium in a bit, but that here is the diagram for the muscle organization. All right. Let's go back to our study guide for a moment and see if this makes sense. All right, so here is the professional drawing, okay, on your study guide. Let's try to label as many things as we can and try to make sense of it. All right, hopefully, you know, you will be able to identify some of the stuff. Okay, so let's start very easy, nice and easy. Over here, the colors, maybe I should try to match the colors. So it will make more sense. All right, so right here, there it is. This outermost layer that goes around the entire muscle. What is the name of that? Anybody? Help me out here. What is that? Just look at the diagram we drew together and match the name. What is that? Outer covering. Yes, Tina, that would be the epimysium. Okay. And it's not just like here, right? It covers the entire muscle, right? Maybe I should probably highlight that for you as well. It covers the entire muscle, like so. There we go. All right. Next, you see, they pulled out a thing here. Right, so what is this? What is this thing that was pulled out right here? This whole thing. That whole thing here. What's that? Excuse me. So you have another one here and another one here. And we pulled out a fascicle. That's correct. Okay, which is a bundle, a group of muscle fiber, right? Okay, so this little thing that we pulled out from the fascicle, that would be a muscle fiber. And again, that just means a muscle cell, right? And then there's one little last thing that we pulled out from the muscle fiber. What might that be? This last thing that is found within the cytoplasm, the sarcoplasm of the muscle cell. What is that last bit? That's right. That's the myofibril. All right. Now I'm going to sound like a broken record here. I'm going to be repeating myself a little bit. So the fascicle is surrounded by perimysium. Okay. Which is like this stuff I'm trying to color right now, the perimysium. See that? That's the perimysium. Right? But it's going to be like pink all over here, right? And that's what I was trying to show you earlier, right? If I peel back the blue, if I peel back the epimysium, you would immediately be able to see the pink, right? You would immediately be able to see the perimysium, right? What about the muscle fiber? What is the muscle fiber surrounded by? Oh boy, too thick. Surrounded by. Yeah, that's right, Mavis. Thank you. That is the endomysium, antenna, of course. Mesium. Okay. And that would be like right here. Okay. And the myofibril would be surrounded by sarcoplasmic. Sorry, it's too crowded here. Sarcoplasmic reticulum. Right? The ER, right? The endoplasmic reticulum, but then like the muscle version. Okay, so I hope that makes a little bit of sense to you. Okay, now put it in a table format below to, just go through it one more time so there's no confusion. The skeletal muscle, the entire muscle is surrounded by epimysium, the blue stuff. What does the muscle contain? The entire muscle is made up of groups of fascicle. Right, so here you can see we take a fascicle and we pull it out. We will see that the fascicle is surrounded by the perimysium. And each fascicle contains multiple muscle fibers or muscle cells. You take the muscle fibers and you pull it out, you see that the muscle fiber is surrounded by the endomysium. Okay, now in this picture, the endomysium is this stuff right here, right? This is the endomysium. And they sort of roll it back a little bit so that you can see the sarcolemma, which is just the cell membrane, right? What does the muscle fiber contains again? What's all these little dots? Well, I guess you can just read it from the next row, but those are the myofibrils. Okay, myofibrils. And they're surrounded by the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay, which is like all these things, right? They just show a little bit of it. And it contains sarcomere. Okay, which is actin and myosin. All right. So we're gonna take a quick break here, 5 minutes, and then we will do more afterwards. If you think of any questions about this whole organization thing, feel free to leave a message in the chat box. I know it's confusing and it's hard to do this virtually without like a physical model, but hopefully, it sort of makes sense. Okay, I'll see you in 5 minutes. All right, let's keep going. Hopefully this stuff makes sense. Now we're gonna go back to our PowerPoint here. Okay, so that's basically what we drew out, right, and tried to explain for the past 20 minutes or so, and you can read all these things and see if it makes sense to you. And here is it's a table that summarizes the regular name versus the special names that we use for muscle. So once again, instead of calling it cell membrane, we call it sarcolemma. Instead of calling it cytoplasm, we call it sarcoplasm. And the regular ER becomes the sarcoplasmic reticulum. The sarcoplasmic reticulum is connected all the way to the surface of the cell, right? It's going all the way to the sarcolemma. And there are these tubes that I'll show you in a second that goes from the maybe I'll draw it out here for you. Okay, so this is the cell. It's really long, and on the surface you have these openings. Okay, so these openings would go into the cell, and it would be connected to the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay, and the calcium is going to be stored in these sarcoplasmic reticulum, right? So you will have Ca, calcium here, and calcium here. And as we'll see in a second, that the action potential will go down these T tubules, and that is what's responsible for triggering the release of the calcium. I think that's coming up soon. This is just the same diagram that we've been seeing, right? Pulling things out from one layer to another layer. The one that's probably worth taking a closer look at would be the myofibril here. As you can see, the myofibril, we have our sarcomere, okay, the contractile unit. And the blue thing that's being shown here, that would be the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And this yellow bit of thing that looks like it's not going anywhere, that's actually the T tubules that I was mentioning in the previous slide. That will go all the way back to the surface of the cell, where you will have tiny openings for ions to go through. Over here, we can see the blue here represents the myosin. That's the thick filament, and then the red one is the actin, which is the thin filament. More on that in the slides to come. This is a more comprehensive view of the muscle fiber. So again, just want to reiterate, a muscle fiber is a single muscle cell. It's very long, and inside you would have all these myofibrils, right? Each myofibril will be surrounded by its own sarcoplasmic reticulum. And these yellow tubes are the T tubules, and they go all the way back to the surface of the cell. You see these openings, right? That is connected to all these T tubules. And in the sarcoplasmic reticulum, once again, it contains calcium. Here is a myofibril, and this whole thing is a sarcomere. All right. Of course, this is a regular cell, so you will find regular stuff like mitochondria. In fact, you have a lot of mitochondria because contraction of muscle requires quite a bit of ATP. This is just more information about myofibril. I'm just going to read it to you. The sarcoplasmic reticulum encases hundreds and sometimes even thousands of myofibrils, which are bundles of myofilaments. Okay, each myofibril is about 1 micrometer in diameter. A micrometer is a millionth of a meter, right? And each myofibril is composed of numerous sarcomeres joined end to end. Remember the picture we drew, right? The very last one that we pull out, so chop it up like that, right? So that's a sarcomere connected to another sarcomere, so on and so forth. And there are two types of protein filaments. We talk about the myosin, the thicker one, and then the thinner one would be the actin. So these are the actins, and then the thicker ones would be in the middle. In addition to the actin, there are also something called tropomyosin and troponin. Okay? And I'm going to explain how all these things work together to create the muscle contraction. Okay, so everything so far is a recap of what we've done before the break. Okay, there's no new information here. except for the triple myosin and troponin. But I'll explain what those are in right now. Okay, so this is called the sliding filament theory that explains how contraction occurs. So let's take a look at the diagram here. We have the actin here, which is represented by the red circles. Okay, and on the actin, there are these active sites which are covered right now. Okay, so you don't see them, the black circles, because they're covered by the green ribbons, right? The green ribbon is the triple myosin. Once you roll away the triple myosin, you can see these black binding sites. Okay. So the myosin, which is the thick one, will grab onto the actin and pull if the binding sites are exposed. Okay, but normally the binding sites are covered up by the triple myosin. So I'm going to write this down for you. Triple myosin covers the myosin binding site on actin. Okay. So when your muscle is relaxing, it's not producing any force, it is in this state. Okay. So the binding sites are all covered up. The myosin is not allowed to grab on to the actin. So what controls the position of the triple myosin? Right? The green ribbon here, what controls the position of that? That would be the job of troponin. So troponin here controls the position of triple myosin. Remember the sarcoplasmic reticulum? Right? That has a lot of calcium in it. Right? Once they release the calcium into the cytoplasm, the calcium will bind to the troponin. The troponin would then roll away the triple myosin. That in turn would expose the binding site. And so once the binding sites are exposed, the myosin will grab onto the actin, and using ATP, it will pull on the actin. Okay, so basically it looks like this. Let's see if I have a picture here. Okay, so these thick blue lines, they are the myosin here, myosin, and then the red one, they are the actin. So once the binding sites are exposed, all these myosin head will grab onto these actins. So, imagine my hands are the myosin head. It will grab onto the actin and pull this way. And then it will let go and grab again and pull, let go and grab and pull. And eventually, you will see the overlap between the actin and the myosin increases, right? So that creates the contraction, right? The overlapping of the myosin and the actin is what's creating the contraction. So here we have a sarcomere here, a sarcomere, and if each sarcomere gets a little bit shorter because the myosin is pulling on the actin, then you have an overall shortening of the entire myofibril. When the myofibril shortens, then the entire muscle is going to shorten, and that's how you create contraction. All right. Bottom line is the contraction is created by the interaction between the myosin and the actin. Okay, so muscle contraction, right? How does it all connect to everything we've learned previously? So of course, it starts in the brain with the primary motor cortex. A signal will go down through the descending tract, which is located at the back of the spinal cord. Sorry, at the front of the spinal cord, rather. And then when it gets to the appropriate section, it will exit through the motor neuron. The motor neuron will then send the signal all the way to the muscle fibers. And the connection between the neuron ends and the muscle is called a neuromuscular junction. Remember, we learned about this a long time ago, right? When you have axon terminal and a dendrite, it's called a neuronal synapse. Well, now it's no longer between a neuron and neuron. It's between a neuron and a muscle fiber. So this connection is called neuromuscular junction. Okay. The neurotransmitter that is used for communication between the neuromuscular junction is called acetylcholine, or ACH. Once the acetylcholine binds to the muscle fibers, then it will trigger action potential to go down the T tubules, which in turn releases calcium. Once the calcium goes out, the troponin will roll away the tropomyosin, exposing the binding site, and then the myosin will grab on the actin and pull. Okay. So let me just perhaps write it down for you. So this would be an action potential from the motor neuron, and the motor neuron will connect with the muscle at the neuromuscular junction. So the neurotransmitter ACH triggers action potential that travels down the T tubules. These action potential goes down and it will trigger the sarcoplasmic reticulum, releases calcium as a result. Okay, then calcium binds to troponin, which rolls away the tropomyosin, exposing binding sites. On actin. All right. So two disorders here. The first one is polio. Polio virus kills and infects and kills motor neurons. And if you don't have the motor neuron, then you cannot communicate with your muscle, which results in paralysis if it's skeletal muscles that are being affected. But if it's the motor neuron that goes to your lungs, for example, or that goes to your heart, then death could occur, because you no longer be able to tell your breathing muscle to operate, for example, and of course that's a cause of death, right? Polio mainly affect children under 5 years of age. About 1 in 200 infections are going to result in irreversible paralysis, and about 5 to 10% of those paralysis would result in death as a result of a breathing muscle becoming inoperable, immobilized, because the motor neuron going to those muscles are damaged by the virus. There is a vaccine for polio, but as with many vaccine programs, there are oppositions, and you know, if everybody got vaccinated around polio, then we probably could eradicate polio, just like we did with smallpox. Another disorder related to motor neuron is ALS, which you might have heard of. This is Stephen Hawking, one of the most more famous physicists out there. He recently died from ALS, but he actually was fighting with the disease for a majority of his life, actually. And in this form of disease, the motor neurons are attacked by your own immune system. So this is an example of an autoimmune disease. And slowly you lose control of your skeletal muscle. So he progressively lost control to all of his muscle except for small cheek muscle that he was able to still control, and that's what he used to control, his wheelchair, as well as the computer that helps him speak through like a computer voice. Okay, so we talk about acetylcholine, right, being the neurotransmitter for communication between the motor neuron and the muscle. So in botulinum, which is caused by a bacteria, you might have heard of like Botox, right? People inject Botox to get rid of wrinkles, right? As they age. That's because is a neurotoxin that causes muscle paralysis. When your muscle in the face kind of become paralyzed, then the wrinkles kind of disappear, right? So that's the theory behind it. But at high dose, right, the botulinum toxin, it's lethal because it prevents motor neurons from releasing acetylcholine. So without the acetylcholine, nothing moves, and you become paralyzed. And again, depending what muscle is affected, the outcome could be lethal, right? If it's muscle, if it's motor neuron cannot communicate with breathing muscle, then you can't breathe and you die. The other one is tetanus. Okay, so this one is a toxin that is found in bacteria that lives in, you might have heard of people say, if you get cut by rusted nail, or if there's some glass in soil that you get cut by, you have to get a tetanus shot, right? So basically these bacteria produce their toxins and they live in soil sometimes. Dog, their saliva apparently can sometimes carry the tetanus bacteria. I think I told you guys, well, I got bitten by a dog one time when I was out and running, and I had to get a tetanus shot because of that reason. So the tetanus toxin blocks the release of a neurotransmitter that inhibits motor neuron. Now, this might sound counterintuitive in the beginning. Like, what is so bad about not having a neurotransmitter that inhibits motor neuron? Well, when you move certain parts of the body, like for example, like my bicep, right? If I move my bicep, I actually have to tell my tricep not to move, okay? So I have to inhibit the opposing muscle. If both the bicep and the tricep contract at the same time, then actually my arm will be locked in a particular position because it's like a tug of war. They both pull and end up nothing moving, right? So that's what the tetanus toxin do. It inhibits, it blocks the release of a neurotransmitter that stops the motor neuron. So as a result, nothing is inhibited and everything just kind of contracts, and then the person becomes very stiff. Right? So this is a classic picture. If you search up like tetanus on Google, this picture will always pop up. This is an artist depiction of soldiers who got tetanus during the World War, because there was like trench warfare. A lot of soldiers have to stay in the trenches for a prolonged period of time, and then a lot of the bacteria in those trenches soak through their wet boots a lot of times, and then it gets into the wounds, and they end up having tetanus. Okay, finally, just 2 more slides here. We're going to talk about the type of muscle fibers. So muscle fibers, again, is muscle cells. And when you look at a whole muscle, the percentage of slow twitch fiber versus fast twitch fibers is going to vary depending on what kind of muscle it is, depending on what the muscle is used for. So what's the difference between slow twitch and fast twitch, right? Slow twitch fibers are good for endurance type of activity. Okay, they produce slow but steady contraction, and they could go on for a long time without getting tired because they contain something called the myoglobin, which delivers oxygen more efficiently than a regular hemoglobin. Right? And so if you create a steady supply of oxygen, the muscle can contract for a very long time without getting fatigued, without getting tired. Okay, so these myoglobin makes the muscle appear darker. And so if you eat meats, right, you choose between the dark meat and the white meat, the dark meats are the ones that have more slow twitch fibers in it. Okay, so if you think about like salmon, right? Salmon, the meat it's red in color compared to something like a tilapia or something that's like white meat, right? And if you think about what the salmon does, salmon has to consistently swim against the current, right? So they cannot afford to get tired. They must continuously use those muscle without fatigue. So it makes sense for them to have the slow twitch fibers. Okay. What about chicken breast? Do you guys know chicken breast? Whether it's like dark meat or white meat? What do you think? Chicken breast. Yeah, chicken breast is white meat, right? Okay. Whereas this is a duck breast right here. Duck breast is dark meat. So what's the difference? Well, the difference is chicken cannot fly, but ducks can fly. So to fly, you have to use the breast muscle to, flap the wings and whatnot continuously, right? Okay, you don't want to be flapping a few times and then you get tired and fall down, right? So the duck breast muscle is dark meat because it has the high slow twitch fibers. And since the chicken cannot fly, the breast meat is actually the fast twitch one. They are good for producing bursts of energy, but you won't be able to sustain that for a very long time. Okay, so muscle that are used for sudden, quick movements would have a higher percentage of fast twitch muscle. Okay, so that's the difference. So if you're running a marathon, right, your running muscle as you train would slowly increase the percentage of slow twitch fibers. If you are training for sprinting, okay, like 100 meters, 200 meters sprint, then as you train, your muscle would switch to more of the fast twitch fibers. It's not really one type versus the other exclusively. It's always a mix, but it's a question of which one do you have more of. All right, so that's the end of the muscle lecture. Let's just go back here and finish up with the muscle questions. There were just only a few here, right? So connective tissue that surrounds the entire muscle. We talked about that several times already, so hopefully you will know by now. It is the epimysium. Whereas if it surrounds the fascicle, then it's the perimysium. Connective tissue surrounding individual muscle fiber, that would be the endomysium. A contractile unit of skeletal muscle would be the sarcomere. Excuse me, two main proteins that forms the sarcomere would be the actin and the myosin. Okay, of course, the actin also has the troponin and the tropomyosin on them, but these are the main ones that forms the sarcomere. Okay. Is there anything else before? Let me just take a quick look. Oh yeah, there are a couple of other questions that I missed at the beginning here. Okay, 3 types of muscles. Skeletal, that we can control. Cardiac, which is only found in the heart. And the other one is smooth muscle. So they found in our intestinal tract, in our urinary tract. We don't control them, but nevertheless, they contract on their own under the control of your ANS. So muscle with high percent of fast twitch fibers, they are best for burst of energy. sprinting. Jumping out of the way if something dangerous is approaching you. For muscle with high percentage of slow twitch fiber is good for endurance. So postural muscle, you've been sitting here for 2 hours and, your back muscle is not like super tired, right? That's because they have high percent of slow twitch fiber, props you up, continues to counteract gravity for you, running a marathon. Okay. So that is that. Okay, so that's it for today. Our next synchronous meeting will be on Thursday, and we will be doing the reproductive system. All right. Good luck with the quiz today. Remember, you have 2 tries, so make sure you take advantage of that. And I'll see you all on Thursday. Thank you for coming. Bye for now.